Hello students! Let's look at two more methods of reproduction today, fragmentation and regeneration. First, let us learn about fragmentation. In general, fragmentation refers to the state or the process of breaking into smaller parts, called fragments. But in biology, it refers to the process in which organisms split into parts that later grow to identical or clones to the original organisms. Do you know what happens to these organisms? Look at your screen. Do you know what happens to these organisms if they get broken into several pieces? Will they die? Surprisingly, they don't. Here, the first organism is an algae, Spirogyra or Spirogyra, and the second one is a flatworm, Planaria. Here, all these parts are referred to as fragments. Yes, the broken parts of the organisms are referred as fragments. It will amaze you to know that each fragment will now grow into a mature, fully grown individual. Here, observe that each individual grown is identical or clone of its parent with respect to its shape, size, and other dimensions. Thus, new individuals are formed from the fragments of the parent's body, and this is called as fragmentation, which is nothing but one of the methods of asexual reproduction. Now the question is, which organisms adopt this method of reproduction? Before answering this, tell me which of these two animals has a fully developed reproductive system? You are right. Complex multicellular organisms have it. So do you think these organisms need to reproduce by fragmentation? No, of course, because they are developed and already have organs of reproduction. Simple multicellular organisms don't have reproductive organs, and so they reproduce by fragments of their bodies. Various fungi, lichens, molds, and other plants, and animals like flatworms, sea stars, annelid worms, and sponges reproduce by fragmentation. The main characteristic of the process of fragmentation is that it can occur both intentionally and unintentionally. For instance, man-made causes or environmental changes may somehow cause the organism to break or split apart into smaller parts. Split apart by chance into small fragments. So, do they die? No. They eventually develop into complete and mature organisms that are similar to their parents, and thus they continue to exist. While in some cases, organisms on getting matured purposely split into fragments and reproduce to become many new identical individuals. For example, animals like hydra or worms like planaria can split into any number of smaller pieces, and each of these pieces grows into a full-fledged individual. Observe here that after the growth cycle is completed, the new organisms are identical or clones of the parent. But hold on. Think for a minute. How does this fragment grow into a full organism? Simply by cell division and cell multiplication. Here, when a fragment of body separates from the parent body, the cells starts dividing and increase in number in that fragment. It finally gets the number of cells that were there in the parent body and thus matures into a new cloned individual. This process of cell division and multiplication is called regeneration. Observe here that only a part of body is grown again, and hence it is called regeneration. Note that here regeneration is just a part of fragmentation process. Regeneration alone cannot reproduce whole new organisms. However, in some multicellular complex organisms, regeneration can help in getting back their lost or cut body parts. For example, in animals like starfish or lizards. In starfish, if it loses one of its limbs, it can regenerate it in few months' time. Even the lost tail of lizard can regenerate itself to its original size after some time. In both the cases here, cells multiply by division and regain the lost body part. But students, note one very important point of difference here. Regeneration is not reproduction. It only gives back lost body parts and cannot give rise to new individual. Just like in fragmentation, each fragment became new individual. If this was true with regeneration, then the broken limb of starfish or broken tail of the lizard would have grown into new starfish or new lizard. Now if I ask you, why can't complex organisms reproduce with the help of fragmentation or regeneration? If you have a look at the Spirogyra or Planaria here, they don't have distinct body parts or complex systems, isn't it? Yes. The body is simple enough to have only one type of cell or very few like 2 or 3 different types of cells in case of Planaria. So here it is easy and simple for a cell to divide and multiply. And so, it can regenerate lost body parts and produce new individual. But look at this whale or human. Are they simple? No, of course not. They have specialized organs and complex systems. And each organ have different types of cells. So let's say if this organ breaks, can it grow into a new whale or a human? No, definitely not. Because it needs other cells present in the other organs too. They will not be there in the broken part. And so, fragments cannot grow into new individual. So to summarize, what we have learnt is that fragmentation is method of asexual reproduction where any simple organism reproduces by splitting the body into different fragments. And each fragment grows into an individual. Regeneration, on the other hand, happens when an organism regrows certain parts or limbs that have been lost. In most cases, fragmentation happens when an organism wants to reproduce, and true regeneration enables the creation of new individuals from these fragments. On the other hand, regeneration in complex animals does not mean the creation of new individuals, but simply regrow the lost parts. So technically, is regeneration a form of asexual reproduction? The answer to that is both yes and no. Think about its reason. In our next video, we will learn about vegetative propagation in plants.